Looking into European funding for culture, as we have done so far, usually comes along with highlighting that transnational cooperation is a must-have. However, we usually stick to European partnerships only. Even though a lot of EU funding programs are open for the participation of non-EU countries, this mostly focuses on European countries and their neighborhood. However, the EU is increasingly underlining the role of culture in its external relations and international cooperation. And that is what we will be shedding light on in today's episode of Culture Beyond COVID, as we will be looking on the new instrument for neighborhood development and international cooperation. So let's go. For the first time, there is one main financing instrument for EU external actions, the so-called Neighborhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument. It merges 10 previous programs as well as the European Development Fund in order to streamline and simplify the financial support for international cooperation and peace-building actions around the world. At the same time, making its external actions more transparent and coherent is also a way of positioning the EU, its values and interests more strongly in the international sphere. As you can see here, it is granted a budget of almost 72 billion euros in fixed prices from 2018, and the funding is distributed along three main pillars. The geographical pillar fosters international cooperation based on regional approaches, including 4 categories: the European neighborhood, the Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia and the Pacific, as well as the Americas and the Caribbean. Almost 2/3 of the entire budget is dedicated to fostering good governance, climate action, conflict preventing, and fighting against poverty and inequalities in these regions, just to mention some of the priorities that still get further adapted to each region and its specific needs. The thematic pillar, however, follows a different logic, as it clearly indicates significant topics and supports international partnerships contributing to these priorities. This includes, amongst others, human rights and democracy, health and education, and social protection. Additionally, there is the rapid response pillar, which is foreseen for countries affected by urgent crisis in order to quickly respond to crisis management, conflict prevention, and peace building. So far, I haven't mentioned culture once. But we will now see that there are some ways for the cultural and creative sector to access and benefit from this funding. In fact, this instrument is meant to be coherent with Creative Europe, so here we go. Most importantly, culture is addressed under the thematic pillar, but can also be part of the geographical pillar, and we will look at it in more detail now. Culture is closely interlinked with these 3 thematic subtopics: human rights and democracy, civil society and peace, and global challenges. Most importantly, cultural interventions are explicitly underlined in the context of the 3rd category, global challenges. In this context, cultural diversity and intercultural dialogue are highlighted in order to foster inter-community relations. At the same time, supporting cultural projects under this frame shall also contribute to strengthening sustainable social and economic development. Moreover, protecting and restoring cultural heritage outside of Europe is also addressed by this financial support. Apart from this clear mention and support for cultural cooperation with and in countries outside of Europe, cultural aspects are also closely related to other subtopics of this thematic pillar. For example, in the field of education, human rights, migration, and gender equality. However, it is not yet clear if and how there is additional support for cultural and creative organizations in this context as well. This vagueness is actually also related to the geographical pillar and its opportunities to support the cultural and creative sector. It is mentioned that actions financed under this pillar shall supplement the projects and priorities from the thematic pillar, and thus The geographical pillar is meant to be open for cultural and creative projects. However, the priorities are strongly adjusted to the national and regional needs and therefore remain to be known in more detail. So, I must admit that there is still a lot of uncertainty related to this funding instrument, and especially regarding its support for the cultural and creative sector in light of the EU's external actions. This is partly due to the final negotiations of the program, but also related to the fact that it is an entirely new fusion of funding instruments. However, we are optimistic that we can provide more clarity in the course of this year and will keep you up to date as soon as promising opportunities for the cultural and creative sector arise.